So in addition to the speakers you've just heard, I want to introduce Laura Ramsey, who is head of the T32 program at Children's Mercy Hospital, one of the co-directors, recently departed as co-director at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Aviva Whalen, who is at University of Utah as a pediatric clinical pharmacology fellow, and Rupsa Boleg, who is at Johns Hopkins as a, as a maternal fetal medicine junior faculty who has completed the T32 and received some support for MPRINT. So.
All right, I guess what we can do is just get started with some questions.
Yeah, I have 3 questions. Do you want me to go from easiest to hardest or hardest to easiest?
Yeah, let's ease on it.
Okay. So I think the easiest one might be, I was a little surprised at the fact that QSP was so low on that list of people doing PK. Do you have any thoughts on why more people aren't using QSP?
I may have to ask my other colleagues. I think just because, well, first off, what's the definition of QSP? I think is one thing.
Yeah.
But the second is that it takes a lot of time and energy and effort to do QSP models. So I think only the larger pharmaceutical companies are able to have those resources to do them quickly. They're being done at some academia institutes like Buffalo, but it does take a lot of time and resource to build the QSP models. But I think, and it's an up and coming, it's kind of like AI, right? It's the new technology. So it's taking some time to build in. But Rob?
No, I just to echo that, but also I think a certain level of domain area expertise in the disease area, in the pathophysiology, in order to sort of engage a QSP model effectively. And of course, notwithstanding how you define what that QSP model is. So.
Yeah, second question is maybe like a comment and leading to a question. I really liked the Precision Therapeutics Academy's approach of leveraging the Birch K-12 program, because when we've talked about the fact that we're in flat funding environments and we're all resource strapped, but we want to do more training. So I actually think that's a great way to introduce people, I mean, not just introduce, but train people in clinical pharmacology or other aspects of what we do. Because the Birch program is very large. The WER program, which is women's health, focused on reproduction, is very large. The Pediatric Scientist Development Program, and then we have another K-12 program focused on critical care. Right. So are there any thoughts on how that the approach of, rather than having a full slot or time for somebody, we can interface with these other programs to get people at least exposed or interested in clinical pharmacology?
So I think as a PI of a KL2, K12, and T32 all at UCSD, and trying always to think about, how can I find someone that's clin pharm minded that could go there? I would actually love to know, and this is something I could probably do through eReporter, but I think there's probably a way also from the NICHD side to help me do this. What programs are currently funded at UCSD as an institution? I think that then I can sort of look at that list, figure out who the PIs are, reach out and say, this is the slot, this is the program, this is the umbrella program of MPRINT. I'd like to introduce you to this program. You think about fellows that we can work on collaboratively to build that network. It's almost sometimes hard to know what's going on at your own home institution, and to look outside of your own lane. So I think that would be helpful. And then it also becomes like, if we don't have a site of Birch at UCSD, how can I know who else to partner with that may be, so it's almost like not knowing, I guess. It's like trying to break that silo, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, I was going to add on to, and you said outside, not just within our own institutions, but outside, which trainees even in those programs might have some clinical pharmacology interests, so we can connect, because it's very hard and difficult, especially in the maternal space, to recruit someone who's willing to give up, a year of payment, or, and to give it up and do an extra year of a T32 fellowship in addition to all their residency and clinical fellowships.
And I was just going to add that, awareness is a big piece, but also we consider precision therapeutics very broadly, right? A lot of our folks don't know anything about, pharmacometrics, and that's fine for what they're doing, right? So I think if people think, oh, that's a clin pharm program, that's not for me, it's sort of opening people's eyes up to what actually we can support. And so that's been true in my own institution. A lot of folks are like, oh, I never thought of MPRINT for what I'm doing.
I think another aspect to keep in mind is right now there's not very much of an in-between from, a K where you're 75% research and being clinical, right? And so in order to break that bridge, currently the only mechanism is really like an R01 where you can get substantial support, but it's not 75%, and there's money to do your own projects. And so I think having more support for, I did an extra year. I did give up a lot of salary to be a fellow for another year, but that wasn't, a problem. It's that when you're transitioning, for people who do like to remain clinically active, which was, which continues to be very important for me, having that support where you don't have enough to apply for an R01, and my institution does support my, unfunded research time, but that's hard to find. And so having small grants where investigator support is part of that grant and not an exclusion. A lot of small grants, they are for study costs only and specifically say no faculty support. And I think that really does not recognize the departmental needs of clinical faculty, and really adds a huge barrier for very smart clinicians and clinical faculty interested in research, but not at a massive department with a research endowment that can financially support them without that funding.
I would say NIH does have a mid-career career development award. I know it's not supported by NICHD, but it is available at some other institutes. So just putting that out there. And we thank you for mentioning that, because we do recognize that there's may be a need for that bridge, right? So between the K and the R. Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that at Children's Mercy, one of the things that we have been successful with is going to all of the fellowship program directors and telling them about our T32 program, not just like, here's what the program is, but here's what's clinical pharmacology, and here are the people that we have trained in a variety of different specialties, from rehab medicine to rheumatology to oncology, so really demonstrating that it affects all of the specialties and that anybody in any one of those things can do it.
I was just going to add, at Vanderbilt, we have Birch PIs or Birch directors sit in on the committees for selecting other KL2 programs. And we have an intentional process of it. Oh, this person might be better for your program, that they'll be sent to our way. So there's a general awareness of fit for programs and the scope of the work that they do. So I think having that built into the pipelines of communication, because we'll refer people to other programs and they refer people to ours, which I think really helps. But we also intentionally make the OB-GYN department, relevant departments aware that tend to have more representation in our scholars.
Yeah. All right. Third question. This is a tough one. So it's a comment and then a question. So in the survey, the comment about, soft skills and learning to work in a harsh male dominated environment concerned me a lot. Not necessarily because what really bothered me was it seemed like that person was asking for themselves to develop soft skills to function in that environment. I think that's the wrong question. The question is, how do we teach the soft skills to the people that are, and for the men that are propagating that male dominated harsh environment? Yeah. So Prince.
I
Not saying you're creating an environment, but since you're
No,
will also clarify, this is a recent graduate, so that really concerned me. It wasn't someone who graduated in 2011. It was someone who's graduated, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years.
yeah,
So.
but you know, I think we need to shift the conversation from how do I function in this environment to how do we change the environment.
yeah, no, obviously I don't have the answer to that question. I will, point out that obviously, there are plenty of men who perpetuate that environment, and that's a problem. I will note, so I was vice president for research for a National Heart Rhythm Society organization, and I put out a call just to all the members, to join this research committee. I got no women who volunteered. I specifically asked several women, and they were all happy to join. And I was really surprised. I was like, we're trying to get more women on this committee. If we simply just ask everybody, they seem to be less willing to volunteer themselves. And it's probably wrong to say that, but I think that men are happy to promote themselves more than women are. And so I think specifically inviting them to, opportunities like that are important.
I think it's also it needs to be quite intentional at an institutional level. And that's sort of why I ended up joining the Office of Faculty Affairs at UCSD, because I now oversee training in these kinds of areas for nearly 2,000 faculty in our School of Medicine, School of Pharmacy, School of Public Health. And I would say that I think this is probably true of most of our institutions, that it's starting to happen with different programming. So there's an intentional requirement of faculty mentor training that happens. That's the first place to have that conversation and to train people on how to do this. There's, of course, unconscious bias training that people are debating whether it's really useful or not. But there's, building respectful environment culture training that happens. So that sort of has to be, for those higher up than us, a requirement, I think, in sort of setting that tone. And just to get Prince off the hot seat, I will say that as women, we actually sometimes perpetuate that as well. And I've been in my own situations where that has happened, but it's been the pressures have come from my female senior colleagues. So I think we're sort of all in it together. And it needs to be an expectation to have that culture shift. Because you're right, you can teach somebody to box and be in that ring, but we shouldn't even have to be in the ring, right?
Yep.
So it's a big culture shift.
I also want to highlight that is not the norm, or it's not true everywhere. So if you are at a toxic environment, you can go to a different academic institution. It's not going to be the same. I've been at a very supportive environment for both work and family life. And, it's not like if I'm in academics, this is what I have to deal with. So if you want to fight the fight, then you have support up here for people that can help you navigate that. But you deserve to be somewhere that you are respected, and you don't need to fight to be respected. And, I just want to make it abundantly clear that there are many very excellent academic institutions where that is not the environment that you're working in.
And I was just going to add, at least at Vanderbilt, with regards to the mentor-mentee dynamic of students and their mentors, we've now required SIMR training for all faculty who are on any open lab list or mentoring any trainees. I'm involved in I'm a trained facilitator, so I lead some of those sessions. And we bring up some of these topics through case studies as examples. And whether that helps ultimately is unknown, but at least that these issues are brought up from the beginning, I think is important, so that they're aware that they shouldn't be perpetuating some of these behaviors. And other things, at least that we've done with the IMSD, T32, and through Birch, is trying to create like a safe environment to bring up issues that don't need to be specific, where at least we can think through these types of problems and, have that be part of a broader discussion. Because I think some of these things perpetuate, and then you have people leaving faculty positions because it festers and stays too long when it could be addressed in some way. So trying to give mentorship and guidance on directions they could take is also helpful for trainees.
And then I don't know if this is part of T32 or K programs specifically, but, you know, for residency and fellowships, ACGME, you know, there is a twice yearly survey that includes how you're treated, whether you're respected, whether you have a venue to safely voice your concerns. Those are compiled in aggregate and anonymous, so they can't be, you know, linked to specific individuals. And so if that's not in place for NIH-funded training programs, it's certainly something to consider implementing so that people have a venue.
Lane?
Yeah, all right. So I'm gonna wear my hat of department chair of informatics. I know there's 3 columns of a survey Sara put together are related, informatics related, EHR data, omics data, and AI, right? So that we do a lot on that. So my question to the panel though is, among your existing training program, what is the kind of a curriculum or training for those fellows about informatics?
None. It's definitely an area that I think the MPRINT could have a big impact in and creating. You know, each of our institutions probably has a whole informatics group, but there haven't been much overlap between the informatics group and the clinical pharmacology group. And until more recently. So it's definitely something that I think we can develop together.
Fantastic. So we're trying to sell a little bit ourselves. I think OSU, at least my department has done a lot of work on this. We have very robust PhD program. I think, Vanderbilt has pretty strong that program as well. And on top of that, we also have master level program in informatics. And we recently have 2 certificate program. One is AI, digital health. The other one is informatics. So it's a much smaller scale. And the other thing we're doing right now, though, is more like summer intensive training program, like 2 weeks. We have somebody just teach you how to do the programming and analysis. And this summer, we focus on omics data. But I think in the future, we can probably focus on more AI and also maybe, EHR data. I think the things we want to say that is, those 3 buckets are very different, okay? In terms of program skill, in terms of how do you train students to get at the data, right? Getting the EHR data needs knowledge about regulatory issues as well as the accessibility, right? And getting the omics data, sometimes you need to know where where data are, even in the public domain. And AI, you need to know Python. Otherwise, you're going nowhere. So those things, I feel it's really, really critical. I think we all experience that. And we have a lot to share. I think this is something I'm getting excited because I think we can do more down the road in terms of training. And we're not engaged much yet. But in the future, we really wanted to, become a resource for everyone. For this domain.
I think the 2-week kind of intensive programs are a great idea. One of the issues we have at IU is, fellows don't have time to take a full course that's 16 weeks long that may not really apply to what we do in clinical pharmacology, right? So having something that's kind of focused on a problem that exists from a clinical pharmacology viewpoint is really important. And those short courses where you get the skills, but then, really where you have to go is what's your project and how's that going to utilize it and grow it? But
I was going to mention one option to consider is having an optional short workshop as part of the annual meeting on the day 1, on a couple different topics that could be for those who want to take it, have like a 3 hours or a half day.
yeah, and that's what I kind of talked to you and Wei about already. If we can have some tutorials on these things, and then our year 5 workshop, we're going to combine with our modeling symposium for some training workshops as well. So.
Thank you, Mike. Great comment. Phil?
Yeah, well, first a comment. it's not just the gender distribution that makes that I'm seeing right now that makes it obvious that I've been doing this for decades, and it's been a long time before I've seen such a spread of genders. Anyway, but I think it's one of the things that it would be nice to do, or a couple of suggestions. One is, I think the NIH needs to let fellows know about the Fogarty program, and because fellows can go elsewhere. Second thing is seeing a model where clinical pharmacology and women in clinical pharmacology are both respected and leaders may need to, I mean, it's starting now in the United States, but you can go, for example, if you're a clinical pharmacist and you want to see what it's like to be respected, go to Holland, where physicians and pharmacists are truly colleagues and they work together, and clinical pharmacology is part of everything. They make decisions. Or go to Sweden, where the clinical pharmacology department decides which drugs get admitted to the country's formulary. I mean, there are places where clinical pharmacology is not a second thought. For example, I'll point out to you, all of you who are pediatricians, clinical pharmacology is not listed as a specialty by the American Academy of Pediatrics. Even though they accept that there's such people, they don't list it on any questionnaire. So I just would ask you to, there are opportunities, and they don't take a long time to go see them. And some of them are fantastic. The Gaslini Institute in Genoa, for example, has its own beach, which is quite nice. That there are places that, and the Mario Negri Institute in Milan, which is a fantastic place. Open up to your fellows, give them a chance to see that clinical pharmacology is a global specialty, because I think that this concept that it's just US is really got to be fought. And the final thing is, it's in the program, you listed it. Industry does have a lot of good opportunities for hands-on opportunities. So fellows who complained about, I didn't have, there are in fact lots of opportunities to go to the FDA, to go to there are opportunities. I think I would ask more, try to figure out, do the fellows not know about them, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the money, or, what are the barriers to getting that? Because they exist.
The data use agreements with the industry partners. The use agreement, the agreements, setting up the agreements with the industry partners, it took IU over a year to set one up.
I mean, I'll say for our T32 at Jefferson, there were elective options in industry and FDA and on like journal editorial boards. It wasn't my particular interest, so I didn't pursue them, but that was available through our T32.
Specifically at UCSD, because we live in such a biotech-rich area, we actually have a program with Pfizer. We do end up sending some of our Clin Pharm. We have quite a bit that actually go into industry because there's so much biotech, and they do get that experience, especially in oncology with Pfizer. It's sort of an easy thing because of that program that we have set up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's often a funnel for kind of jobs after the graduation. It's a great experience.
Thank you, Phil. I'm packing my bags right now.
Okay.
No. I do want to mention that I think sometimes it's a lack of knowing, but also a lack of asking. Sometimes we encourage fellows to ask their PIs for experiences, right? They don't know what they don't know. So if there's something that they feel they would like to pursue, I think it's also on the fellow to ask their PI, hey, is there an opportunity to do this? And then they could kind of guide them in the right direction. So thinking about that on sort of both ends.
And it may be nice, Leslie, at the September meeting for Captain to ask the folks that are there, because you'll have a wide, many of us and others that'll be there, to figure out what the global opportunities are, what the industry opportunities are. And that can be something that then becomes a resource, because I know what we've got in San Diego. I haven't been to the beach in Genoa, but there's a way to we can sort of crowdsource that information to educate us, to then educate our fellows.
So I wanted to comment on the workshops idea and the additional training courses. I was really struck by the Precision Therapeutics Academy focusing the research idea. And the question that was being asked. And I think that would really help with identifying, so what skills or what tools do you need and at what depth? So we don't necessarily need to teach people how to do some sort of mathematical analysis from first principles, but here's a tool, it helps you answer your question, and here's how to use it effectively. And I think you can deliver that in a shorter period of time and in a focused way. And then you can maybe have modules identified. Like this workshop, once you know sort of the list of questions that have been sort of refined, or list of research questions that have been refined.
I think the individual development plan is a really good way to get at both the opportunities for internships and other experiences, as well as what skills that they need for doing their research project. So that is one thing that I think can be really helpful. And maybe there can be a fellow specific workshop in the Captain Network for making that individual development plan and how to talk to your PI about that plan.
Yeah, and I actually, the regular attendance at the steering committee meetings are very helpful because again, they'll usually early in their project, they'll have to present their plan, and then they'll often get very good feedback and say, oh, well, this is great, but you should consider this, which is something that they or their mentor may not have known about. So it really has helped improve the quality of the projects.
Hi, this has been a really interesting discussion. So when I was watching the presentations, there were at least two that had maps that showed sites. And it's funny, they were there to show where all the sites were, but what I was struck by was all the places that there were no sites. And so I don't know really what efforts are done at outreach. So forgive me if I'm just way out of line. You guys are already doing all this outreach to those places. But I just thought I would mention that at OHSU, they want to stimulate early career researchers to be interested in developmental origins of health and disease. And what they do is in the summer, they have a 3-day early career workshop, and then they get the word out, and then people can come. And it just struck me that that might be a model because, I mean, we don't have the resources to fund sites in every state in the country, but it doesn't mean there aren't interested people that you could pull in.
Yeah.
So,
well, the map we did, I don't think we have shown this year, is our MPRINT hub map, which starts out with the sites for the original MPRINT hubs, and then where we've funded opportunity pools and had other collaborations. And that doesn't even include the worldwide attendance to our webinars. So we do see that as a role for MPRINT, is to reach out to those who may be the single person at their institution doing the work and making them available and aware. And I already had a conversation with Coco this morning about, reach out to us, let us know, we'll find the support for you.
And one venue for that could be the R25 model, right? So we've got several R25s at UCSD that are the short course summer institutes that we have in cardiovascular medicine, ID, and neurosciences, although generally they tend not to be pediatric or maternal. But one thought could be potentially, as you were going through the list of options, is to have an R25 that is maternal pediatric focused at one of our sites. People probably want to come to San Diego and have and have some some coursework there that would sort of get to the question of gap that Lang was speaking about too.
One of the efforts of OPPTV specifically is, this is a little bit tedious, but is email. I sat down and we created a list of HBCUs. We created a list of pharmacy schools, and I just emailed them and just, let them know that this program is available, these resources available, and some replied back with interest and some I never heard from. But, we do recognize that we have to reach out to some other sites, and we've been trying.
I think that's a good point. You reach out to pharmacy schools because it's the undergraduate level where we really need to start reaching out to put, hey, clinical pharmacology or maternal pediatric precision therapy is an option for a future career, and making it aware there. I know we are now at APHA's mid-year meeting recruiting for our T32 fellows to try to reach those pharmacy students.
I think the question I came to ask was mostly answered in terms of how are you looking at diversity in terms of the fellows coming in and where you're reaching out. A population, at least that I've tried to sort of make sure I'm getting in terms of pharmacy students at the FDA is really Hispanics, because we're not getting many people in that population, whereas in our population in the US, it's definitely a population that we need more people in the area of clinical pharmacology. So thinking more broadly about the diversity component would be really great. Thanks.
I know one of the issues with diversity is also who's going to medical school and pharmacy schools. And I would suspect that that's a lower percentage of Hispanics than the population. So again, it starts in the high school or earlier level.
Leslie, can I actually ask you about the mechanisms? Because I know that there are certain institutes that have like the R25 that we have for those three other programs that I mentioned are diversity focused R25s. Is there an NICHD mechanism for a diversity focused R25?
I don't want to say I don't think so. I'm not sure. Perdita, are you aware of it? I'm not aware of an R25 that's specific to diversity at NICHD. That's not to say that's not a component of the current R25 that we support, but I'm not sure if that is a focus.
Okay.
I got furrowed eyebrows over here, so they're looking.
And the other question I had was just about timing out, because you talked about a T32 and then going to like an F32. But there's an NRSA cap.
At 5 years.
So it's 5 years. Okay. All right then. Okay. So then you could conceive doing a 2-year T32 program and then writing your own F32 in that first year and then going through.
Yeah, you could ideally use that T32 as a support to your own individual F32, which would ideally free up another slot, right? You have that that fellow move into their individual. Now you have a new slot to bring someone on board. That's a good model. I don't know. I say that super easy, right? But I'm not sure how feasible that is. But it is something that we've seen, and we do encourage our sites to at least try it out.
Yeah, I think that could work at a postdoctoral level with PharmDs and PhDs. What I've seen with the MDs is that they sort of want to get to their clinical component, or they don't want to, they want to get to a faculty position, right? So then in order to stay on at least the T32, I think the F32 is the same, you just stay as a postdoc label, so you have to be on a contract, and then you're not getting you're not getting a faculty position, all those things sort of have to be on hold. Yeah. So I think that's a little bit of a wrinkle in the process, but I could see where it would be feasible for folks that are naturally going to go into doing their postdoc as well.
I did want to go back to Elamiga's comment about recruitment, diversity, that sort of thing, and just kind of maybe if you all could talk about the challenges you all have seen in recruitment, in trying to diversify your programs, and then also in retention, like retaining your fellows. Are they staying in academia? Are they moving completely outside of Clin Pharm? So just your thoughts on.
Yeah, so I was telling Audrey and Sara earlier that, since MPRINT doesn't actually fund training slots, one of the things that we thought would be helpful would be the diversity supplements. So we've had that kind of on our radar since the get-go. And it's tricky. You can't really advertise for those positions, but if there's an interested person who's eligible, then obviously you can apply for it. And it's just, we just haven't had anybody come through that was actually eligible. It's just, it's a hard problem. I don't know what the solution is.
Another issue with the diversity supplements is they're only 1 year. So you don't find out that you're eligible for a slot until September. And most of the fellows have started their positions already in July. And so that's a little bit late into the year. And then they have until next May to spend the money for that award. And so it's a bit challenging. And then they don't get a second year. It's not like a fellowship for one of the regular slots. So they only can have a second year if there is another diversity supplement spot. So I feel like that's a bit of a holdback from somebody trying to do that, and might be a reason why we're not getting a lot of applicants like that.
I'm a fellow and in training still, so I can really only speak to my experience. But as a Hispanic woman, I did not necessarily have all the parents who kind of taught me to go into research or had great mentorship in that regard. And I think one of the things that really helped me get into it was my mentor was like, hey, I know you have no experience and have no idea what clinical pharmacology is, but I'm going to help you kind of go through this whole process. And I think just showing me that that the barrier wasn't as high to get involved. And it was really helpful because I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. And so I think just as a mentor, when you're talking to people who don't necessarily have that experience, just explain to them that you can get started with really, really small things. So it's something that mentors can do to help the diversity.
I can speak a little to being part of graduate admissions for PhD programs. I think a lot of it has to do with the admissions perspective on what good candidates are, and having at least training them on having a holistic perspective on what good experiences are, and understanding of nonlinear paths to success. Because I think some admissions committees could be a little biased of individuals having to take extra time or not having a specific experience due to, having to work more or other activities that candidates might have. And so we've done a lot of kind of intentional training of our admissions to really look at a candidate as a whole, and look at them individually, instead of being, direct comparisons where opportunities might not have been present for some candidates and for others, and having a good understanding of that. And so we do some admissions committee training, and I think that helps quite a bit in understanding diversity from different lenses, both, especially with the challenges of admissions committees that we have these days on recognizing diversity as well. So.
The other thing too is that the definition for a diverse applicant is actually quite broad for NIH, and it's actually sometimes hard to identify those individuals, and having that. So I do kind of a dog and pony show about the T32 and use that as an opportunity to educate our faculty in terms of who qualifies. And so who does and who doesn't, right? So we do have, because of our research portfolio, we get a lot of folks that are international, which don't qualify, and that becomes difficult. But then a lot of people don't even themselves know that, I can be from a disadvantaged background, and that by NIH definition meets it. It's not just racial and ethnic diversity there. So I think that it's part of it's that educational process, and many of us here have our hands in different groups, and just sort of letting people know what that means. But it has been tough. And also to get. Oh, I'll let. Go ahead. The other thing was, just before I forget, you mentioned about the retainment. So again, we're in Biotech Central at UCSD. So, they come to us and they go, well, how much are we going to make if we stay in academics? And how much are we going to make if we go down the road and join that other group over there? So, I mean, there's a lot of forces that pull people. California, San Diego, I think was voted the most expensive city in the country. So if you want to stay in San Diego, it's a little bit hard sometimes to do that on a UCSD salary. So there's all those forces that come in hand. I have to say that I personally feel, well, I would love everyone to stay in academics and stay at UCSD and stay in pediatrics and in OB-GYN. I'm actually okay with them going into industry, because then I know that I have industry partners that know about clinical pediatric and maternal clinical pharmacology. And I stay in contact with all those folks and just try to, keep that outreach. So it may not be as much of a win in that sense, but I do think that it's really important for us to be educating that generation that wants to go work in industry as well.
I was going to add on to Viva's comment about finding a mentor and then go back to we have to reach out earlier, and Indiana has several programs through the CTSI and the Cancer Center and other funding opportunities that fund summer student programs for undergraduates and high school students. And I think it's an excellent opportunity to take students and introduce them to clinical pharmacology. And when I have students, my goal is not that they'll get an award-winning project in the end, but they'll be introduced to a broad array of research and ability of what we do in clinical pharmacology and experiences, and hopefully will spur an interest in them to stay in that field.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to follow up on Audrey's question about the R25s. So in my quick research, NICHD does have 2 R25 programs, a summer research experience program and a research education program. Neither of them call out specifically diversity, but I'll just say that I know for sure that the R25 program that's run out of Duke currently, the PI has made a concerted effort to make sure that he includes diversity in the colleague and the undergraduates and the graduates that he picks. So I know that's true for that particular program. I will say that NHLBI has a really nice program, R25 program, short-term research education program to enhance diversity in health-related research. They have an RFA that just came out, 2025, HL 22012 is the old number. So based on the institutes, there may be programs that are available, and NICHD certainly may be amenable to that, with leadership like Aaron, who will, I'm sure, promote that.
HLBI has Pride, which I think is the one that you were just mentioning, which we have one of theirs, and you guys, it's great. Yeah. So, just put that in there for that.
And I was just going to mention one other aspect of recruiting that we do at Vanderbilt, which is where we have we directly go and recruit and at least make awareness of Vanderbilt's graduate programs at Abercam, SACNAS. We partner with our prep program and our MARC programs as well to make sure that there's at least a general awareness of the opportunities and graduate programs that are available to more diverse students.
Well, I just wanted to address some of the comments that had come up from the survey, just to make sure that we're addressing our younger trainees and their concerns. I think a couple of things that really caught my eye. One is, work-life balance and feeling the need to choose between one or the other. And I think that's a common concern, especially, I'm not familiar, honestly, with PharmD training in life, but for physician researchers, I think that's a common concern. And again, I think it goes back to where you're looking for a job and what kind of job you're looking for. It is, again, definitely possible to find academic institutions that will give you time to develop a research portfolio and support the fact that you're a parent and have children, whether it's during training or afterwards. Sometimes it's hard if you have the expectation of doing everything all at the same time. And I think for me personally, yes, you can have it all, but for me personally, it's not that you can have it all at once. So when I was a new mom and really for the first year postpartum, I don't know what I did outside of being a mom. I guess I was in training and saw patients in clinic, but that certain things took a back seat and you just, catch up later when they're older and you have time to dedicate your efforts to those things. So, I think mentorship plays a big part in it, and having people that you can look up to and talk to who have walked that path and can show you it's possible. Again, I think you can see from the table up here, there's a lot of mentors, even if you don't have them at your institution to speak with, but it's not a zero-sum game. You can definitely do all of it and find institutions and mentors that will support you in doing that. The second point that I wanted to make was someone had made a comment that they didn't feel that the soft skills were important in fellowship. I would say, personally, I strongly disagree with that. I think, the fact that I had a year of someone mentoring me in grant writing was invaluable. Again, as a physician, I got zero education in grant writing during, 8 years of clinical training. So I found the soft skills of grant writing and, navigating an academic career and even knowing sort of what kind of career options there are, networking at the T32 annual meetings, as well as meetings like this. I think those are really invaluable skills and really critical for career development. So I just wanted to put a plug for that.
Thank you. I think there was another, okay.
I also wanted to ask Sara about what the plans are for the hands-on training that some of the trainees had asked for in the survey. I think that's a real need in the captain network as well. Again, we don't want to overlap. That came up several times yesterday in what we're doing. And personally, for recently leaving Cincinnati Children's and moving to another institution with a T32, we have partnered very closely, invited all of their fellows to our pharmacogenetics lectures. They invite our fellows to their lectures. And so since things can be done virtually, that has worked out very well. So they're not, doing a pharmacogenetics lecture series, inviting all the same people or similar people to do that. And I think that has come up in the Captain Network before when it was not the Captain Network, but just the T32 program about developing a common curriculum. But the roadblock really seemed to be somebody taking ownership of that. And so I think as the Captain Network and the MPRINT, we could really work together to identify who's going to take ownership of what, and so that there's no overlap. And I think you might be the best poised to do pharmacometrics hands-on training, especially for clinicians. So I think that would be a really nice thing to add.
Right. Yeah. And actually the survey idea came about after our conversation last year at the Captain Network. And then I talked to Sue Rahman and her comment was, well, what are we looking for? And so the first part of it is, what type of training do we want that is hands-on? And, then who should develop it and what should be needed. So there are aspects of, kind of a didactic component, which could be potentially live, but it could also be a recording or a virtual option on the website that people can utilize this data set, watch a tutorial. Here's a data set you can analyze, reach out if you have question type things and stuff like that. We've also been considering redesigning our webinar series to be a more interactive component where we could do some of those, have fellows present, or trainees present an idea, give feedback on the idea, or do some of these more case study type issues there. So it's a little bit more interactive, which in part, we feel that the Captain Network webinars, that really covers a lot of the didactic aspects. And so in a way to bring more interest into our webinars, can we make it more interactive and give it as a place where maybe fellows can present a project idea and get feedback from experts as well as other trainees, practice presentation skills and soft skills, but also get some of these more technical skills as well.
I wanted to add, I'm sorry, you weren't turned this way, so I just wanted to tell you. I wanted to add one more player to the potential hands-on experience paradigm, and that's the Pediatric Trials Network. And so you can get sort of hands-on protocol development and other types of soft skills and things that we talked about as far as engaging in large clinical trials. So we're developing a pilot program now in collaboration with Leslie. It's very early in this development. It's just a paragraph right now, but I think it's something we're working on. So within the next year, I think that's something that we can incorporate into this paradigm as well.
Yeah, I'll also say that's something I actually have been recommending to people. I know with Sharon Nachman always saying, hey, do we have early career investigators, trainees who could come sit in and participate in our impact network? And I'm actually thinking, why can't we do that with PTN and MFMU as well? I'm having them sit in on some meetings and learning these skills as well.
I don't know whether anybody on the panel has ever done this, but when I was in Columbus, we had shared residencies. And I wonder whether people think it's possible to do a shared fellowship. You know, we had 2 women sharing one pediatric residency program. It worked very well. The institution loved it because you got about 70% from each. But I just wonder whether people think it's viable.
At Utah, the program leverages like classes that fellows are already taking in the clinical department with a clinical pharmacology department. And so a lot of the fellows are able to complete both fellowships at the same time with just a few extra classes. I don't know if that's what you were talking about with shared.
No, it was basically, you had one pediatric resident with a 40+ hour week, and there were 2 women who shared the position. And they both women usually had families. You know, they had husbands too, but for some reason they were left out of the equation. But anyway, and it worked very well.
So I'm not familiar with that. So did they do 6 years to complete their residency?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I don't think we have any.
They actually didn't need 6 years because usually they did it for a year or so while their children were especially young.
I see.
And then went back to a regular double job that most.
So they essentially went half time for as long as
they shared. They had a shared, and it was a real shared thing, so that when one woman couldn't do it, she could say to her partner, "Look, can you take my my shift, and I'll take yours next week, etc." And I actually once asked this to the NIH; they were not at all interested. But I just wondered, forgetting the funding for it, I just wonder. None of you ever did a shared residency. I wish I could give you some names, but Columbus has changed so much. It's even called nationwide, obnoxious name for a hospital. But anyway, but I think it's one way to deal with this work lifestyle problem, because it really is hard to be a mother and a research fellow. I mean, it's tough. No man could do it. I mean, I think the current solution to our institution is that if somebody needs time off, they can extend their training period. So if they need 6 months of, almost no clinical time, they're allowed to just prolong it. I don't think the shared thing is anything that they're doing now.
The ACGME now does have a lot more allowance for time off, but again, because everything is quite tightly regulated via the ACGME now, there's not as much program flexibility for things like that. It's, there's like their rules, and that's the rule.
Well, rules can be changed.
I think that's a great practice model, though. I mean, in the real world, that's what people do, right? You have part-time positions and you have 2 people who work part-time to fill it. But
we have shared faculty.
Right, shared faculty positions, yeah.
Same thing.
All right, do we have any more questions? Perhaps in the time we have left, if maybe, I think we always talk about our I hate to say this, our grievances and what's lacking, but maybe if you all could maybe highlight one thing in your program that you think you've made maybe the most strides in, or highlight things about your current program or training practices that maybe, another program could sort of take on. I think if we share what our programs are doing well, we can also bolster other programs. So
I think one of the things that I've been most impressed with my program is there's a pretty even split between clinical fellows and like PharmD, PhD fellows, and just sitting there and collaborating together. I think each group has their own sets of strengths and really complement each other in such a wonderful way. I couldn't imagine doing the program with either just clinical fellows versus PhD fellows. So I just love working collaboratively in that way and learning.
I'm Jefferson, and I completed T32 when I stayed at Jefferson. I think that one of the biggest things that I loved about my program was the mentorship that I got in not just the clinical pharmacology education, but career development. There was a lot of opportunities to explore different career types, whether it was, industry, FDA, academics, and grant writing and writing papers. And I think having that dedicated time, again, as a physician where your clinical education really doesn't cover those things. I think it was really excellent and made for really good networking for after I graduated to continue these partnerships that I had made during the fellowship.
So having been at Cincinnati Children's and Children's Mercy, I think each of the two programs has different strengths. Children's Mercy has a long history of training the clinicians, and their alumni are primarily physicians. And me coming to the program less than a year ago, we've now got a lot more PhD applicants and a lot more understanding that PhD and other degree applicants are going to enhance the training of the physicians. So I think that is something that has changed. And then the collaboration across sites, I think, is something also that we feel has really been very successful. So we're not reinventing the wheel at each of the sites. And Cincinnati Children's has a real specialty for pharmacometrics, and Children's Mercy has a lot of great history in pharmacogenetics. And so just playing on those strengths to offer all of the fellows at the different sites their opportunities, different opportunities, I think has been wonderful.
So we've had trainees that have been involved in multiple programs, like they're funded by one, but they sort of interact with other different ones. And I think that really is the gel to what makes a lot of this work. And so it's that these folks can really serve as bridges, even more than what we think. And that's been really fruitful from an investigational standpoint, collaboratively. That's led to other grant mechanisms happening. So that's been really fun to see that cross-pollination happen.
Well, I would say one skill that I'm really proud of that we've done through Birch is really teaching our scholars how to mentor and how to receive and give feedback. Because that's a soft skill, but one that if you know how to do it well, it'll really perpetuate in your career if you know how to, mentor your own trainees. And I received that on my end because as a former Birch scholar myself, a lot of the skills that I learned, I perpetuated in my own professional career. And we really try to give those same sets of skills back to the scholars. And I think we do it well at Vanderbilt, as evidenced by the success of our scholars, but also the mentorship that they lead afterward.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that. I think at Vanderbilt, they've really seen the value of investing in, the trainees and the junior faculty, making sure they have the protected time and the resources, because it seems like it just, the amount of time, effort, money that you give to them, it sort of, comes back, manyfold. So, I echo Digna's comments.
I think at IU, our training is really in the diversity of students as well as in the mentors and the projects they're leading. So we have everything from clinical mentors like Dr. Haas to basic science, drug discovery, cheminformatics mentors, bioinformatics. And so the trainees have a focused project in one or more of these areas, or, obstetrics, maternal, pediatric, pharmacometrics. But during our joint meetings, journal clubs, and seminars, they're exposed to a variety of different topics and areas and the didactics. So they get a good overview of the breadth of clinical pharmacology. They're able to develop a depth through their individual research. And then they also get to grow their communication skills as they try to communicate with PharmDs, MDs, PhDs, informatics, the diversity of the different areas that we work in as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, perhaps I can leave you all with the final comment. I think one of the things I appreciate about Captain, outside of the trainees are the PIs, the mentors that really don't receive any funding for being a mentor. However, they take it on with such grace. One of the things I appreciate about the PIs and Captain is they have sort of a peer-to-peer mentorship amongst themselves. They meet quarterly. We have mentors that have, you know, been doing training for 20, 30 years. And we have some recent PIs that are, you know, within 5 years of their training program. And to have that exchange of how to best run programs and how to best mentor, I think is really really unique to ensuring that training is moving forward. So that's one thing I do think that Captain very uniquely has. All right. Well, it looks like we are at time. So I want to thank all the panelists